The loudest person in the room is rarely the strongest. The words would mean nothing to anyone standing inside Sterling Dynamics that morning, at least not yet. The headquarters shimmered beneath walls of polished glass as executives, investors, and invited guests gathered around a spacious demonstration floor where the company's elite security division was preparing for a live exhibition. Conversations echoed beneath the skylights, expensive shoes clicked across marble, cameras flashed, and quiet anticipation floated through the air like electricity before a summer storm. At the edge of the room, almost invisible among the movement, Nathan Brooks pushed a simple mop across the spotless floor with slow, deliberate strokes. His faded maintenance uniform carried no medals, no titles, and no clues about the life he had buried years ago. To everyone watching, he was simply another middle-aged employee making sure the building looked perfect before an important event. Victoria Sterling entered with effortless confidence, every eye turning toward the young CEO whose reputation for brilliant leadership was matched only by her relentless competitiveness. Beside her walked Marcus Hale, her longtime head of security, broad-shouldered, disciplined, and respected throughout the company for his calm professionalism. Victoria surveyed the room with satisfaction before her attention landed on Nathan. A faint smile appeared on her face. "Careful," she called loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "I'd hate for the janitor to steal the spotlight from today's professionals." A ripple of laughter rolled across the crowd. Nathan stopped only long enough to lift his eyes. His expression never changed. "Just making sure no one slips," he answered quietly before returning to his work. Victoria folded her arms. "You seem confident. Tell me something, Nathan. Do you think you could last even 10 seconds against my bodyguard?" More laughter followed. Several employees reached for their phones, sensing harmless entertainment before the official presentation began. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, clearly uninterested in turning an ordinary employee into a public joke, but Victoria continued anyway. "Come on," she teased. "Don't tell me you're scared." Nathan rested both hands on the mop handle and looked at her with calm, steady eyes. There was no anger in his face, no embarrassment, only the kind of patience that often goes unnoticed until it's gone. "I'm not interested in proving anything," he said. Someone near the back muttered, "That's what they all say." Another burst of laughter echoed beneath the high ceiling. Victoria stepped a little closer, amused by his refusal. "Sometimes people surprise you," she said with a playful grin. Nathan gave a small nod. "Sometimes they do." For just a heartbeat, the room seemed strangely quieter. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The air conditioning whispered through hidden vents. Even Marcus found himself studying the maintenance worker's posture instead of his uniform. There was something oddly familiar about the way Nathan stood, balanced without trying, relaxed without appearing careless, like someone who had spent a lifetime choosing restraint over recognition. No one could explain why the atmosphere suddenly felt different. They still believed they were watching a joke unfold. They still believed the quiet single father standing beside an ordinary mop was the smallest man in the room. Within the next few moments, every assumption they carried into that lobby would begin to unravel. Nathan Brooks left the company headquarters long after most of the lights had gone dark. He locked the maintenance closet, placed the old mop exactly where it belonged, and climbed into a weathered pickup truck whose paint had faded beneath years of Midwestern winters and hot summers. The engine rumbled to life with familiar determination as he drove 23 miles toward a quiet neighborhood where small homes lined tree-shaded streets, and children still rode bicycles until sunset. The moment he pulled into the driveway, the front door swung open before he even reached the porch. 11-year-old Lily Brooks raced outside with a bright smile that erased every trace of exhaustion from her father's face. "You made it before dinner," she said, wrapping her arms around him. Nathan smiled gently. "I told you I would." Inside their modest home, the scent of tomato soup and grilled cheese filled the kitchen. Nothing matched the luxury surrounding Sterling Dynamics, yet every chair, every photograph, and every hand-painted picture on the refrigerator carried something money could never purchase. Nathan washed his hands, helped Lily finish her math homework, and listened carefully as she described her science project with the excitement only a child could bring to ordinary moments. She spoke about planets, constellations, and dreams of becoming an engineer one day. Nathan never interrupted. He simply listened, asked thoughtful questions, and celebrated every small victory she proudly shared. After dinner, Lily noticed a faint scuff on the sleeve of his maintenance uniform. "Long day?" she asked softly. Nathan chuckled. "Every honest day is a good day." She studied him for a moment. "Did anyone bother you again?" Nathan looked out the kitchen window where the last golden rays of daylight settled across the backyard fence. "Sometimes people speak before they understand someone else's story," he answered. "That is why we try to understand before we speak." Lily nodded as though she had heard those words many times before. She probably had. They were not lessons Nathan found in books. They were lessons life had carved quietly into his heart. Later that evening, after Lily had fallen asleep, Nathan folded laundry with practiced hands before opening a small wooden box tucked carefully inside the hallway closet. Resting inside were a faded American flag, several military challenge coins, and a worn photograph of a younger man standing beside teammates whose names the world would never know. He looked at the picture for only a few seconds before gently closing the lid again. Those memories belonged to another lifetime. Tomorrow morning he would still wake before sunrise, make pancakes for Lily, pack her lunch, and drive her to school before reporting to work with the same calm smile he carried every day. Across the city, Victoria Sterling reviewed schedules for the following morning's investor presentation. Her assistant casually mentioned the quiet maintenance employee she had teased earlier. Victoria barely remembered the conversation. To her, Nathan Brooks was simply another anonymous face among hundreds of employees. She had no reason to believe otherwise. Yet somewhere deep inside the building, Marcus Hale could not shake the image of the maintenance worker's posture. Years of professional training had taught him to notice details others ignored, and something about Nathan's balance, his measured breathing, and the calm certainty in his eyes refused to leave his thoughts. As the city settled into silence, one man prepared for another ordinary day devoted to his daughter, while another quietly wondered whether the simplest employee in the company had been hiding an extraordinary past all along. The next morning arrived beneath a pale blue sky as Sterling Dynamics welcomed investors, board members, and media representatives from across the country. Fresh coffee filled the executive lobby, polished glass reflected the early sunlight, and employees hurried through the hallways making final preparations for one of the company's most important presentations of the year. Victoria Sterling reviewed every detail with her usual precision. She expected perfection because perfection had become the standard everyone associated with her name. When she reached the demonstration floor, Marcus Hale was already inspecting the security equipment with quiet professionalism. He noticed Nathan Brooks walking past with a bucket and cleaning supplies, moving carefully between rows of chairs without interrupting anyone. Marcus watched him for a brief moment before returning to work, but the strange feeling from the previous afternoon had not disappeared. Victoria noticed the glance. "You are still thinking about our maintenance man?" she asked with an amused smile. Marcus answered honestly. "There is something unusual about him." Victoria laughed softly. "He is unusual because he refuses to react when people tease him." Marcus folded his arms. "That is not what I meant." Before Victoria could ask another question, one of the event coordinators rushed over looking anxious. "We have a problem," she said. "The guest speaker has been delayed almost 40 minutes because of traffic. We need something to keep everyone engaged." Victoria looked across the room where dozens of important guests had already begun talking among themselves. Then her eyes landed on Nathan quietly wiping the edge of the presentation platform. A playful idea appeared almost instantly. "I think I have something that will wake everyone up," she said. She walked toward Nathan with several executives following behind her. Conversations gradually faded as curious eyes turned toward the unexpected gathering. Nathan looked up from his work. "Good morning, Miss Sterling." Victoria smiled politely, although confidence still colored every word she spoke. "Nathan, would you be willing to help us entertain our guests for a few minutes?" Nathan leaned the mop against the wall. If it helps the event run smoothly, I will do whatever I can. Victoria gestured toward Marcus. Marcus has spent years training in executive protection. I thought it might be fun to demonstrate a few defensive movements. Nothing dangerous. Just educational. Nathan remained silent for a moment before answering. I do not think I am the right person for that. Why not? Victoria asked. Because I clean floors. Nathan replied calmly. Exactly. Victoria answered with a light laugh that encouraged several guests to smile along with her. That is what makes it interesting. Nathan lowered his eyes briefly before speaking again. There are better volunteers. Marcus finally stepped forward. His voice remained respectful. Ms. Sterling, perhaps we should choose someone from the security team instead. Victoria shook her head. This will only take a minute. Marcus looked directly at Nathan. You do not have to do this if you are uncomfortable. Nathan appreciated the gesture, but before he could answer, he noticed Lily standing just beyond the lobby entrance with her school backpack. She had stopped by because classes had been cancelled for a teacher workshop, and one of Nathan's co-workers had offered to watch her until his shift ended. She smiled proudly when she spotted her father. Nathan smiled back with the quiet warmth that always appeared whenever he saw her. Then he turned toward Victoria once more. If this demonstration is truly meant to encourage respect and learning, he said gently, I will participate. But I would rather no one be embarrassed today. An unexpected silence settled over the room. No one could explain why those simple words suddenly felt heavier than everything that had been said before. The crowd naturally formed a wide circle around the demonstration mat as conversations faded into curious whispers. Phones rose quietly into the air, eager to capture what everyone assumed would be a harmless moment of corporate entertainment. Nathan Brooks stepped forward without urgency, placing his maintenance gloves neatly beside the mop before walking onto the mat with the same calm pace he used while crossing the lobby each morning. His shoulders remained relaxed, his breathing slow and even, and his expression carried neither pride nor worry. Marcus Hale approached from the opposite side with equal composure. Unlike the audience, he was no longer smiling. Years spent protecting executives had sharpened instincts that often noticed details words could not explain. Nathan did not stand like someone pretending to be confident. He stood like someone who no longer needed confidence to be visible. Victoria Sterling folded her arms near the front row, amused by the growing anticipation. Remember, she announced with a playful grin. This is only a demonstration. Light laughter drifted through the room once again. Nathan nodded politely. I agree. Marcus extended his hand first. Nathan accepted it without hesitation. The handshake lasted only a second, yet something passed between them that no one else recognized. Marcus felt balance instead of tension. Stability instead of force. Nathan released the handshake with quiet courtesy and stepped back exactly one pace. The movement was so natural that most people never noticed it, but Marcus certainly did. He tilted his head slightly, studying the maintenance worker more carefully than before. Victoria glanced toward the guests. Well, she said cheerfully, it appears our volunteer is ready. Nathan looked toward Lily, who stood safely beside one of his coworkers near the back of the room. She smiled at him with complete trust, and he answered with the same gentle smile that had reassured her since she was a little girl. Then he returned his attention to Marcus. Thank you for being willing to do this, Nathan said quietly. Marcus answered with equal respect. Thank you for stepping up. One executive chuckled under his breath. The janitor is being awfully formal. Another whispered. He probably watches too many military movies. Their comments faded almost unnoticed beneath the soft hum of the ventilation system overhead. Sunlight poured through the enormous glass walls, stretching long reflections across the polished floor. Somewhere near the refreshment tables, a coffee cup settled gently onto a saucer. The room seemed strangely still, as though hundreds of people had begun holding the same silent breath without realizing it. Marcus slowly assumed a basic demonstration stance, careful and professional, intending only to illustrate simple defensive positioning for the audience. Nathan mirrored him with effortless ease, not exaggerated, not theatrical, merely comfortable. Marcus blinked once. The positioning was precise. The weight distribution was natural. The distance between them was exact without appearing calculated. He lowered his voice so only Nathan could hear. "Where did you learn to move like that?" Nathan's answer came almost as a whisper. "A long time ago." Marcus searched his face for another clue, but found only kindness. Around them, the audience still expected an amusing display between a seasoned bodyguard and an ordinary maintenance worker. They had not noticed the expression slowly changing across Marcus Hale's face. For the first time that morning, the experienced protector was no longer evaluating a volunteer. He was quietly trying to understand the man standing in front of him. Marcus Hale offered a respectful nod before speaking clearly enough for the audience to hear. "This demonstration is about awareness, balance, and self-control. There will be no winner and no loser." Nathan Brooks answered with a quiet smile. "That sounds exactly right." The guests relaxed, expecting an easy exchange that would fill a few minutes before the keynote presentation. Victoria Sterling stood confidently near the front, certain the moment would reinforce her company's polished image. Marcus slowly shifted one step closer, raising his hands in a neutral defensive posture designed for instruction rather than competition. Nathan responded with the same measured calm, neither tense nor hesitant. His feet rested naturally beneath him, his shoulders remained loose, and his breathing never changed. Marcus decided to begin with a simple demonstration of distance management. He reached forward carefully, intending only to illustrate how a trained protector guided an unexpected person away from a client. The movement was slow, deliberate, and completely professional. Before anyone realized what had happened, Nathan had already taken one quiet step to the side. There was no sudden motion. No dramatic reaction. His timing simply left Marcus gently reaching toward empty space. A few people laughed politely, assuming the bodyguard had done it intentionally. Marcus smiled and reset his position. "Very good," he said softly. Nathan inclined his head. "Thank you." Marcus tried again, this time changing the angle while continuing to explain the importance of positioning. Once again Nathan moved only inches, preserving the same respectful distance without appearing rushed. It looked almost effortless, like someone stepping aside to let another person pass through a doorway. The audience remained entertained, but Marcus was no longer thinking about the crowd. His attention narrowed completely onto the quiet maintenance worker standing in front of him. Every adjustment Nathan made came at exactly the right moment. Never too early. Never too late. It was not luck. It was experience refined through countless hours no one in the room could imagine. Marcus lowered his voice. "You have done this before," Nathan answered gently. "Long ago." Marcus searched his face again. There was no pride in the reply. Only memory. Victoria noticed Marcus had stopped smiling. "Everything all right?" she called from across the mat. Marcus looked toward her briefly. "Everything is fine." Yet his tone carried a seriousness that had not been there before. He turned back toward Nathan and quietly said, "May I try one final example?" Nathan nodded. "Of course." Marcus demonstrated another controlled movement, careful, balanced, and completely appropriate for a corporate setting. Nathan responded with remarkable precision. He lightly redirected Marcus's forward momentum with the smallest adjustment of posture, causing the experienced bodyguard to pause naturally before taking a comfortable step to regain his balance. There was no impact, no struggle, and no embarrassment. The motion ended almost before the audience realized it had begun. An unexpected silence settled across the lobby. Several phones slowly lowered. A retired military officer attending the investor event narrowed his eyes from the third row. Another guest quietly whispered, "Did you see that?" Marcus stood perfectly still for a long moment before offering Nathan a look of genuine respect. "That was exceptionally controlled," he said. Nathan simply replied, "Control matters more than strength." The words lingered in the air as quietly as the morning sunlight stretching across the polished floor, and for the first time Victoria Sterling realized that whatever story she believed she understood about the humble single father standing before her was beginning to slip beyond her control. The silence lasted only a few seconds before an unfamiliar voice rose from the back of the lobby. "That movement was not something you learn in a weekend seminar." Heads turned as an elderly gentleman wearing a dark blue blazer slowly stepped forward from the crowd. His silver hair was neatly combed, and a small American flag pin rested on his lapel. Marcus Hale immediately recognized him. "General Robert Whitman," he said with quiet respect. Several executives straightened instinctively. Victoria Sterling walked forward with surprise. "General Whitman, I did not realize you would be joining us this morning." The retired officer smiled politely without taking his eyes off Nathan Brooks. "I accepted the invitation at the last minute." Then he looked directly at Nathan. "It has been a long time." Nathan's expression remained calm, but something softer appeared in his eyes. "Yes, sir. It has." A murmur spread across the room. Victoria looked from one man to the other, clearly confused. "You know each other?" The general nodded slowly. "More than you realize." He stepped closer until he stood only a few feet from Nathan. "Tell me, Sergeant Brooks, do you still wake up before sunrise every day?" Nathan smiled faintly. "Old habits are difficult to leave behind." The general chuckled quietly. "Some habits are worth keeping." Victoria blinked. "Sergeant?" The words seemed completely out of place beside the maintenance uniform standing before her. General Whitman turned toward the audience. "Many years ago, before most of you had ever heard the name Sterling Dynamics, this man trained some of the finest soldiers I ever had the privilege to command. He never cared about applause. He cared about discipline. He believed the greatest victory was preventing harm before it ever happened." The room fell completely still. Marcus lowered his hands, no longer viewing Nathan as a volunteer in a company demonstration. He now understood the calm confidence he had sensed from the very beginning. "I knew something was different," Marcus admitted quietly. "I simply could not explain it." The general continued. "During one overseas mission, Sergeant Brooks guided an entire team through a crisis without firing a single shot. He brought every one of his people home safely. That is the kind of leader you never forget." Nathan gently shook his head. "There were many good people on that team." "There certainly were," the general answered. "But only one of them kept reminding everyone that bringing people home mattered more than becoming a hero." Victoria felt the certainty she carried into the morning begin to disappear. She looked at Nathan's faded maintenance shirt, then at the simple work boots that had crossed her polished floors every day without attracting a second glance. She remembered teasing him only hours earlier. She remembered assuming silence meant weakness. Now every memory felt painfully incomplete. One investor finally spoke. "If he accomplished all of that, why is he working here?" Nathan answered before the general could respond. "Because life changes." His voice remained gentle. "My daughter needed her father more than the world needed another soldier." No one laughed. No one reached for another joke. Even the phones that had been raised for entertainment now rested quietly at their owners' sides. Sunlight poured through the glass walls, warming the silent room as if the building itself had paused to honor a truth no title or paycheck could measure. For the first time since the event had begun, Victoria Sterling understood that the most remarkable person in the room had never been standing at the center of attention. He had been quietly mopping the floor while everyone else walked past without ever seeing him. The investor presentation officially resumed, but very few people were paying attention to the financial charts glowing across the massive screen. Conversations had become quieter, slower, almost thoughtful. Victoria Sterling remained seated at the front of the room, yet her attention never drifted far from Nathan Brooks as he calmly picked up his maintenance gloves, returned the mop to his hands, and continued cleaning the edge of the demonstration area as though nothing unusual had happened. There was no attempt to enjoy the admiration that now surrounded him. No effort to explain himself. He simply returned to work. That simple decision unsettled Victoria far more than any impressive introduction ever could. During a short break between presentations, she quietly asked her executive assistant to gather everything the company legally possessed about Nathan's employment history. The assistant returned 20 minutes later carrying only a thin personnel folder. Victoria frowned. "This cannot be everything." The assistant shook her head. "It is all he provided. Outstanding attendance. Exceptional performance reviews. Never late. Never involved in workplace conflicts. He declined 2 promotions because they required longer hours." Victoria slowly turned another page. "No military awards? No leadership experience? Nothing?" "No, ma'am. His background check was completely clean, but very ordinary." Victoria closed the folder without another word. Something about that answer felt incomplete. Meanwhile, General Robert Whitman walked beside Nathan as he quietly emptied a trash bin near the conference rooms. "You never told them," the general observed. Nathan smiled faintly. "They hired a maintenance worker." "That is exactly what I promised to be." The general looked at him with deep respect. "You always carried your rank with humility. I hoped retirement would not change that." Nathan rested the trash bag inside the collection cart. "Retirement did not change it. Becoming a father did." Before the general could answer, Lily appeared carrying the lunch container her father had packed that morning. "Dad, I saved half my sandwich because I knew you would forget to eat." Nathan laughed softly. "You know me too well." Lily handed him the container before noticing the general. "Hello, sir." General Whitman smiled warmly. "You must be Lily." She nodded proudly. "Yes, sir. Your father used to take care of many people." Lily slipped her small hand into Nathan's. "He still does." The general's eyes softened as he looked at the quiet father standing beside his daughter. "Yes," he said gently. "I can see that." From across the lobby, Victoria witnessed the brief exchange without hearing every word, but she saw something she had overlooked completely until now. Nathan was not defined by medals, uniforms, or titles. Everything remarkable about him appeared most clearly when he was simply being a father. He listened when Lily spoke. He knelt slightly so their eyes met naturally. He thanked her for half a sandwich as though she had offered him something priceless. Victoria suddenly remembered her own late father, a businessman who had rarely found time to attend birthdays, school concerts, or family dinners. Success had filled every room he entered except the one that mattered most. Watching Nathan quietly place his daughter's lunchbox back into her backpack, Victoria felt an unfamiliar sense of regret settle over her heart. For years she had measured greatness through achievement, influence, and recognition. Yet standing only a few yards away was a man who seemed to measure life by entirely different standards. The realization stayed with her long after the applause for the investor meeting faded, because for the first time she wondered whether she had spent years overlooking the very kind of strength that could never be listed on a resume or displayed inside a corner office. The following Monday morning arrived with the quiet rhythm Nathan Brooks valued most. He dropped Lily off at school just before 8 o'clock, reminded her to enjoy her science presentation, and waited until she disappeared through the front doors before driving towards Sterling Dynamics. He expected another ordinary workday. Instead, he found Victoria Sterling standing alone near the employee entrance without reporters, executives, or assistants surrounding her. She wore a simple navy business suit rather than the commanding style she usually preferred, and for the first time since they had met, she looked uncertain. "Good morning, Nathan," she said softly. He smiled with the same quiet courtesy he always carried. "Good morning, Miss Sterling." She hesitated before speaking again. "Would you walk with me for a few minutes?" Nathan nodded. "Of course." They crossed the peaceful courtyard where a light autumn breeze stirred the maple trees and scattered golden leaves across the stone pathway. Neither of them spoke immediately. The silence felt uncomfortable for Victoria but perfectly natural for Nathan. Finally she took a slow breath. "After the investor event, I spent the weekend learning more about your military service." Nathan looked ahead instead of at her. "General Whitman speaks kindly about many people." "He did more than that," Victoria replied. He explained why so many people still respect you. Nathan answered gently. Respect belongs to everyone until we choose to lose it. Victoria stopped walking. I also learned that you declined consulting offers worth more money than most people earn in years. Nathan nodded once. That is true. Why? She asked. You could have led security companies, trained federal agencies, or traveled the world. Nathan smiled quietly. Lily had already lost her mother. I did not want her to lose her father to another career. Victoria lowered her eyes. There was no bitterness in his voice. No sacrifice he wanted anyone to admire. He spoke as though choosing his daughter had been the easiest decision he had ever made. They resumed walking beneath the morning sunlight. I owe you an apology, Victoria admitted. I judged you by your uniform instead of your character. Nathan remained silent for several steps before answering. Most people do. Clothing is easy to notice. Character takes time. Victoria let those words settle before asking another question. Would you accept a promotion? Nathan looked surprised. Doing what? Leading leadership development, she answered. Teaching discipline, decision-making, and integrity. Those are qualities our company needs. Nathan considered the offer carefully before smiling with sincere gratitude. It is generous, but I cannot. Victoria looked disappointed. May I ask why? Nathan glanced at his watch. Because every afternoon at 3:15, my daughter waits outside her school expecting to see my old pickup truck pull into the parking lot. I promised her I would be there whenever I possibly could. Your position would require more hours than I can give. Victoria stood speechless. She had negotiated billion-dollar contracts, persuaded powerful investors, and solved business crises that made national headlines, yet she had never heard anyone decline opportunity with such peaceful certainty. Nathan had not chosen the smaller life. He had simply chosen the life that mattered most to him. As he politely excused himself and continued toward the maintenance entrance carrying his familiar cleaning cart, Victoria remained beneath the maple trees watching him disappear into the building. For the first time in many years, success itself seemed to wear a completely different face, and it looked nothing like the one she had spent her entire career pursuing. 3 weeks passed quietly, and life at Sterling Dynamics gradually returned to its familiar rhythm, but something inside the company had changed in ways no quarterly report could measure. Employees who had once hurried past the maintenance crew now paused to offer a greeting. Security officers found themselves speaking less about authority and more about responsibility. Even Marcus Hale noticed that the atmosphere throughout the building carried a little more patience than before. Nathan Brooks accepted none of the attention. Every morning he still arrived before sunrise, checked every hallway, polished every floor with the same careful pride, and left each evening in time to pick up Lily from school. One Friday afternoon the annual Employee Appreciation Gathering was held in the company's courtyard beneath clear autumn skies. Families were invited, children laughed across the grass, and long tables overflowed with homemade desserts prepared by employees from every department. Nathan stood near the edge of the celebration helping an elderly maintenance coworker carry folding chairs while Lily happily joined several children decorating paper lanterns. Victoria Sterling watched the scene from a distance before quietly walking toward Nathan. This time there were no cameras, no executives gathered behind her, and no audience waiting for entertainment. She stopped beside him and spoke softly enough that only a few nearby employees could hear. Nathan, there's something I should have done the first day we met. Nathan looked at her with the same calm kindness that had never changed. Victoria extended her hand. I judged your job before I learned your character. I am sincerely sorry. Nathan accepted her handshake without hesitation. Apology accepted. She smiled with visible relief. You forgave me very quickly. Nathan glanced toward Lily, who was laughing as she helped another little girl untangle a string of decorations. Holding on to resentment usually hurts the person carrying it more than anyone else. Victoria followed his gaze and quietly nodded. I think I am finally beginning to understand that. At that moment Lily ran over carrying 2 paper lanterns decorated with bright stars. Dad, can we hang these together? Nathan smiled. Absolutely. Victoria stepped aside and watched as father and daughter carefully tied the lanterns beneath the branches of a large maple tree. They laughed when one lantern spun gently in the breeze, and Nathan adjusted the string with the same patient care he seemed to bring to every part of his life. There were no medals on his shirt, no rank on his shoulders, and no audience applauding the moment. Yet somehow it felt more meaningful than anything that had happened during the investor presentation. General Robert Whitman, standing nearby with Marcus Hale, quietly folded his arms and smiled. "That is the strongest leadership lesson anyone will remember from this company," he said. Marcus nodded. "Not because he defeated someone," the general finished the thought. "Because he never needed to." As the sun slowly settled behind the trees, warm golden light filled the courtyard, and the paper lanterns swayed gently above the families gathered below. Nathan took Lily's hand as they prepared to leave for home, walking toward the familiar old pickup truck waiting in the parking lot. Victoria remained where she stood, watching them disappear down the quiet street until they were no longer visible. She realized that true greatness had never entered her company wearing an expensive suit or asking to be recognized. It had quietly arrived every morning carrying a mop in one hand and a lunchbox for a little girl in the other. And in the end, the lesson everyone remembered was not about strength, reputation, or success. It was about dignity that remained gentle when mocked, humility that remained steady when praised, and the quiet courage of a father who proved that the strongest person in the room is often the one who never feels the need to prove it.